A week had now passed since the terrible incident of young Bryony Temple, and Abigail was now ready to release the body. Gabrielle Temple arrived to go through the final details with her. She was far from the woman Abigail and Marguerite had first met. Gone were the looks of a natural beauty, with her long, flowing locks, blonde as the summer sun, and the subtly made-up face that accentuated her vivid, piercing blue eyes, only to be replaced by a haggard and weary woman who had the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her hair, unkempt and greasy, fell down and clung to the red and black checked shirt she wore, her jeans all soiled with oil and dirt from the mountains. But the faint signs of her beauty could still be seen under the tears and the heartache. As the tears cascaded down her face, Abigail gently placed her slender arm around her shoulders in a vain attempt to somehow comfort her. Although this was obviously without effect, she didn't know what else to do. She never did. In her opinion and personal experience, the loss of someone close, regardless of age and innocence, is the hardest thing to come to terms with. It was there and then that she decided that nothing would stop her from resolving this horrific case, and the others. In the background, Adam was questioning Gabrielle's husband, Terry, and couldn't help but send an admiring glance over to two of the strongest women he'd ever met. One who had just lost the one most important person in the world to them, and the other fighting her inner demons in an attempt to comfort her and offer her solace. Abigail's demons ran deep within her. Her father was taken from her during her mid-teens, and although nothing was apparently suspicious, she could never come to terms with the way he went. It happened around October 1974, and when she returned home from school, she was greeted by a flurry of blue lights flashing like the roller coaster wheels in the darkness on the pier. Inside, her mother was slumped in the beige leather reading chair, surrounded in the library by 3 female police officers, whilst in the office, her father's lifeless body was draped over the very desk in her office, with a single gunshot wound to the left temple. At the tender age of 14, she didn't quite understand the consequences of what had happened, and how a verdict of suicide could be determined. Now, when she looks back, she realized that her father was right-handed and couldn't have taken his own life. Also, he never owned a gun. In their neighborhood, it wasn't deemed that one was required. Now, at 33, Abigail looked back on her childhood with a strange sense of fondness. Her father's death was the main reason that she had taken her current career path. Growing up in West Virginia, her parents were successful in their given careers. Her father was the major investor in one of the country's leading technology development companies, Invertech Limited. And her mother was a popular political candidate running for the mayoral position of Stillwater, their hometown. During her teens, Abigail was a loner with only a small handful of friends, with her long auburn hair plaited into pigtails, and her demeanor that of a very insecure young girl. Her face was pretty and covered in freckles when the sun was too hot. She was idolized by her parents, who were somewhat overprotective of their little girl, keeping her out of the war zones that were their careers, and steering her more into education than socializing. Back in the here and now of her vast office, she looked at the imposing desk that had once adorned her father's office, and a solitary tear slowly meandered down her beautiful, high cheekbone as she reminisced. Suddenly, she pulled herself together, wiped her face, and reapplied her makeup, stood up, and made her way down to meet the vultures of the press. There, she gave a short interview to confirm the discovery of the body, and that they have identified her, followed by a heartfelt appeal to all parents to be vigilant with their children, and also for any information which may lead to the apprehension of this monster. Then she turned on her heel and disappeared back into the shiny glass office block in which her department was located. The next morning she woke at 5:30 with a start. She was sweating profusely, and there was a damp outline of where she had slept. Looking upon the chrome-effect queen-size bed, she realized she missed someone being there to reassure her that everything would be okay. Making her way across her lavish penthouse apartment in the affluent quayside, she prepared scrambled eggs and a fruit smoothie to help start the day, took a shower, and prepared for the long, demanding day ahead. As she left her apartment, she noticed a figure entering through the staircase door. She gave him a fleeting glance and thought no more of it, turning and making her way to the lower-level parking lot where her silver SLK 230 Mercedes sat. It was 6:45 when she arrived at the office.
"Good morning, Miss Fountain,"
the security officer pleasantly offered. "Good morning, Sydney," she replied. "Am I the only one here?"
"No, Detective D'Agostino is in your office, ma'am. He seems quite agitated."
As she made her way through the reception area, she could see Adam pacing it excitedly.
"Abigail,"
he shouted.
"they want you to look into the other 9 deaths."
He followed her into her office, watching her as they walked. He was admiring this woman, the mother of his child, with her fine model-like figure, stunning beauty, and smoky gray eyes, and thinking how amazing she was, having all the issues with her home life, and yet still having an amazing career, and also how well respected throughout the States she was. As they sat, Marguerite walked in, and Adam handed them the case files for the previous murders. The first thing she noticed was the varying demographic of the victims. They ranged from children to homeless people to the affluent professional. All of them sent Abigail into recoil with every harrowing detail. The next day, the 3 of them boarded a flight to Connecticut to look over the case file for the first victim, identified as Melissa Waters, a 23-year-old waitress for Casa del Rosa Mexican restaurant and freshman at the local university. They discovered that she had sustained a blunt force trauma to the head before having her liver removed, and then the blood drained. They also determined that she was alive while these procedures were carried out. She could only imagine the ordeal the young woman had gone through and question what had happened to the missing organ. Chief Oliver Garrett of the local PD welcomed them at 8:15 the next morning, showed them into a large private office to the rear of the station, and presented them with the case file of Melissa Waters. The wound where the organ had been removed was precise and clean, which suggested the killer knew exactly what they were doing. Judging by the preliminary ME report, the liver had been removed complete and with surgical precision. She noticed that even the stitches were medically administered with dissolvable twine. Abigail made her way down to the basement where the autopsy department was currently located. As she walked through the double doors, she was greeted by mortuary assistant Jeremy Cosgrove. Jeremy was a tall, slim man with thinning black hair, noticeably combed over to create the impression of a full head of hair, which was a complete failure, and it was all she could do to avoid staring at the most obvious insecurity. He wore thick black framed glasses and a lab coat which looked to be 2 sizes too small for him, but he appeared pleasant and professional. Abigail had questions regarding the death of Miss Waters and how the procedure had taken place with little or no conspicuous circumstances. Jeremy had no logical answers for them, and Adam bit his bottom lip before turning on his heel and heading for the door, only for Abigail to shortly follow. Once back in the comfort of the office where Adam felt more at ease, the 3 of them discussed possible scenarios in which the crime took place, but they couldn't quite grasp how no one heard or saw a thing out of the ordinary. This led them to the conclusion that Melissa must have known her killer. But how? She had only been in town a few weeks, and the only people she acquainted with were her college alumni and co-workers at the restaurant. They were at a loss of what to do.